Welcome back to Careers at the End of the World. It's me, your host, Jenn Walker Wall from Work Wonders Careers, and I'm really excited and honestly quite grateful to be able to share with you an interview with a Work Wonders Hall of Fame client, Corey. Now, Corey worked with us for quite some time. She had her sights set. And when I mean set, I mean like very clear, very targeted, very focused search that crossed both the tech market and the media market. And if you know anything about the job market right now, you know that those are two of the hardest places to get traction. And not only that, I forgot to ask her about this because there was a lot of good stuff to discuss that I wanted to make sure that you heard. She actually was getting her master's degree while this whole thing was going on. She went through a layoff. She had a resume that was consistently helping her land interviews, and it was still a really difficult, really challenging job search. And she agreed to share her story so that you could hear a little bit about what the longest job search actually looks like. This is not really typical, but she was so focused. And I want you to hear how she supported herself and supported her goals and how she made the decisions she made. Not because you necessarily need to make the same ones, but that you can hear her reasoning and hopefully be inspired by her story to make the best decisions you need to for yourself. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Work Wonders alum, Corey. All right, Corey. So can you take me back to when you first reached out for help in your job search? Do you remember?
It was, I think, like October 22, a long time ago.
It
It's a
was.
long job search. At that point in time, I had been in my current job for 8+ years, and I knew I wasn't quite happy, and it was not the place that I was going to stay long term. And I was kind of honestly frustrated. And I had previously contracted with someone to help me with my resume, and we were a mismatch. We did not have the same writing style or approach to talking about my career. And that was a very bad process to me. And I felt like my resume was just a disaster. So I was connected to you. It was actually a suggestion from Tech Ladies that I reach out to you. And I shared my resume with you. And immediately you were like, your resume is fine. And I so appreciated that. Um, because it made me feel a little bit more confident in myself at that moment at a time where I was not feeling very confident. And you gave me maybe 5 things to tweak on my resume. And you rightfully said, like, go use this for a couple months, get some data, figure out what's working and not working, where you're getting traction, and then come back and we'll do something. Like, we can tweak it. And we inevitably ended up working together on job search strategy and some of my cover letters and like what my LinkedIn profile looked like instead.
It's funny that telling people they don't need my help at a certain point, I didn't mean for it to be this way, but it's so effective because I think people trust you when you're like, here's what you need to do, and it doesn't involve working with me necessarily. And it's funny because so many of those people are like, no, actually, can you help me? Can we do this together? Can we figure out a way? It's not that much fun to do on your own, but sometimes, it is a matter of like a few small tweaks. I also don't always have the occasion to be like, your resume's in good shape, so that sort of speaks to you and the work you'd put into it previously. This was a long job search for you, Corey. This was a tech job search. It was a media job search. And like those are two of the hardest places to get traction right now. So can you just walk us through what this time period looked like? Because it did take a while.
I think it was, I'm going to say serendipity at this point, which you can say on the other side. So we
Yes.
started to work together when I had a job, and we probably were working together almost a year. And looking for a job when you have a job is very different than looking for a job when you are laid off or unemployed. I was then laid off um, about a year later, and I was grateful that I already had you like in my life and in my world, and we were already working together. I had really good materials. I didn't have that moment of panic of, oh my resume needs to be in good fighting shape. Everything was ready to go. I had a system for how I was applying for things. Um, so all of those things were very helpful. So then I was laid off in October of 23. Um, and got a job October of 24. So it
S-
was a year of unemployment looking. And I think the main difference is you're definitely a casual job seeker when you're employed because you have less time.
Right.
I had infinite time when I was unemployed, near infinite time to dedicate to the job search. I will say, like, I pretty much knew what I wanted throughout the whole time and kept that in mind and like had a pretty narrow job search. Um, but it was always good to talk with you and kind of you nudge me in different directions in various times to just explore because at times your job search will feel stagnant and like you're not getting traction. And sometimes looking at a slightly different avenue reinvigorates you a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, a year is a long time to look for a job without one.
Mhm.
And managing that amount of time is actually really hard, especially in a time when there's not a lot of jobs available. So can you talk a little bit just let's just put the tactics of the job search aside. Like how did you take care of yourself? How did you set yourself up for success? Like what were some of the components that went into like helping you stay focused and motivated?
I had a spreadsheet that I tracked every job that I applied to and what the status was of that job. I had decent traction. I didn't get interviews for every job I applied to, but I had like a decent callback rate. I might not go all the rounds, but having some interaction based on the jobs I was applying for was helpful. As far as taking care of myself in the job hunt, I will say the thing I discovered was sleep. And
Mm,
I am always a person who burns like my candle at both ends. And I would definitely say through my 20s and 30s, like, 4 or 5 hours of sleep, that was enough. And that's not where I am right now. And you can't, well, I can't sit down and write a resume and write a cover letter that makes any sense. I can't perform in an interview and answer questions in an eloquent way if I haven't slept. So I had a rule that I got 8 hours of sleep. Now, did I go to bed at a decent hour? Absolutely not. But I didn't have to be up to go to the office. So if I didn't start my day till 11, that was okay. So I definitely prioritize sleep. Being laid off or job hunting, especially being laid off, is isolating. And you have to find yourself a community. So early on, there's the Work Wonders job search community was amazing. Our weekly and biweekly meetings, the chat boards were great to connect with other people. I also ended up seeking out job search counsel, which with Never Search Alone, which was super helpful because then I had like a dedicated small group of folks that I could check in with. And um, I also was mentoring and or seeking mentors on a platform called ADP List, which is really for, I'd say, folks in technology, just connecting with each other. It's so important to be able to talk to people who are in the same boat with you and or were recently in that boat just to normalize a very chaotic time period and get some strategies to just get through. So that really worked for me. And then the other thing I'd say is figure out what brings you joy. So that is hard when you've been laid off and your finances really change. And the things that bring you joy can't cost much money anymore. But like literally anything that makes you happy. So whether that is watching an alien documentary or listening to a true crime podcast, do those things, go meet for coffee, like do those things and just have something to look forward to.
yes. I'm thinking about for some reason when you said alien documentary and true crime, I just saw Vin Diesel's face pop into my
I
memory.
might have gone down a franchise rabbit hole. I just watched action
Yeah.
movies and it really, for me, it was like totally distracting, not based on the job search. And at the end of the day, like the good guy wins and they do
Yeah.
outrageous things to get there. And that is like what I needed.
I actually really love that. I mean, I it was funny because like while you were job searching, it gave us lots of reasons to use Vin Diesel gifts. There were lots of Vin Diesel gifts happening in the community chat and in our messages back and forth. One of the things that I did notice about your job search, right, is that your resume actually did work I thought you were being quite humble. You were applying to super competitive institutions, having a very reasonable success rate in a hyper competitive market. I also know that you did a lot of networking to supplement the fact that sometimes there weren't a lot of jobs. Do you want to say a little bit about how you spent some time? I'm thinking about over the summer and the networking project that you sort of took on for yourself as a way to potentially generate opportunities and insight, despite the fact that there weren't a ton of jobs for you to apply for.
I think like with the current job market, in a way, it's almost to me about redefining what networking meant.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people think you network to get a referral to get into a job. And while that might have been a process that worked in years past, I don't know if that really works right now. And I was looking at the intersection of media and technology. And because there's so much competition, it doesn't really work there. In my opinion, that was just my experience. But what networking does do, it tells you about the company vibes and it gives you some insights into what's happening and what timing might be in the company. Are they really hiring? What types of jobs are they looking for? Is this industry for me? Is this company for me? And networking is also something that's largely within your control. So when you're job hunting, nothing is in your control except for like the jobs you apply to. That's about it. Anything that happens after you apply, not for you to decide. And I was going back to your question over the summer, there were moments where I had less traction and or no traction. And the month of June was cricket and it was
yeah.
unnervingly quiet. Now there is like the saying that it gets a little slower over the summer, but I always had some traction and it was like I had nothing. And I spoke with you about it and you were like, well, what can you do different? Which was always the advice you gave me when I was struggling. And you said, I think you should go do some informationals. And before I did poo poo that idea, but at that moment, I didn't have a reason to poo poo it. So you had said, go do 50 in the month of July as a challenge. And I was like, sure, let me go do 50. I didn't hit 50. It was too high. I hit 44 though, which I hustled.
That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot of conversations.
Um, but that was the most positive month I actually had in my job search. It only resulted in maybe 2 or 3 interviews, like, in later months, so it wasn't, like, necessarily it unlocked new opportunities for me, but I think something I had been struggling with is the way I showed up to an interview before
Mm,
that, and there's always, like, so much anxiety. What are they gonna ask me? How am I gonna answer this? Do I sound like an idiot? And doing a month of informationals, like, I was there to have a good time, get to know someone, and just have a conversation, and I really took that into my future or to, like, the
mm,
interviews that I had after that. I was definitely much more relaxed as a candidate. I was much more chatty and asking questions. It was much more of, like, a reciprocal conversation rather than having it be super transactional, and I had to have come off a whole lot less nervous, and even after, like, a year plus of interviewing, I still would get anxious and amped up.
yeah.
But after that month of 44 informational interviews, it was a lot less so. And the other piece is like during that, at one point, I was like, oh, let me explore roles of gaming companies. And I was super curious and like excited about it. But at the same time, those conversations helped me realize I would have little traction there and it wouldn't be
Mhm.
where my most like there was a certain subset of jobs I could apply to in those types of companies, but it would probably be a little bit more of a struggle for me.
Mm.
And so that was a good lesson learned.
I don't think people realize, because often, like, the goal with networking is, like, hopefully this person has a job or knows someone who can get me the job. But I don't think people realize how valuable information and perspective is, because what it does is it saves you time that you would otherwise invest in applications in an area or an organization that ultimately isn't gonna be a good fit. So that's why I think having conversations, regardless of sort of what the long-term outcome might be, is so valuable, because that immediate perspective of like, I could see myself here, or like, oh, absolutely not, really helps you move in the right directions. The other thing is I think it's helpful for people to realize that it took 44 conversations to yield 2 or 3 immediate opportunities. that is a lot of networking. And I'm not going to say for nothing, but for like a small immediate reward in the most traditional transactional sense. And I often think people don't realize how much networking has to happen in order for so few, right? Like it's a lot of talking for a little immediate payoff. Not that that's not worthwhile. It's just that like your volume has to be at a certain level in order for that to be a really useful strategy. But then the other thing I'd say is like we don't even know what the payoff of these 44 conversations might be yet, right? Because now they can marinate, you know? And I remember one of the things you asked me when you landed the job is like, what should I do now? And I was like, you should follow up with 44 people, probably, right? Because it's like a way to reinforce the conversation. And now people know you and are invested in you. And it's one of the easiest ways to maintain some of those relationships for the long term. So it'll be interesting to see what might come from those conversations down the line.
And I think the other piece is like, some people might hear this and be like, how the heck did you find 44 people to talk to? I started with 5 friend colleagues that I've known for a very long time because it was comfortable. And I asked them, like, okay, who else in your orbit should I talk to? And that spiraled out in every single conversation I had. I said, who else should I talk to? And
Yeah.
everyone always had 1 or 2 people to like link me to. And that was super helpful. And the other piece is that, like, going back to telling these 44 people I got a job afterwards, still love doing that. But to me, like, karma is a boomerang, and that's really like so much a part of what this job hunt is. And what you put out is what you get back. And so making sure you put out good. So be super gracious to the people you've talked to. And when in a month they're like, hey, can you talk to this person for me? Yep, I can do that for you.
Yeah.
Because it really will continue to cycle through.
Yeah, that's how these systems grow. That's why I really like the ecosystem model because like ideally it's like a generative, you know, interdependent space where people are able to access each other's connections. I mean, I think that's partly what makes it fun, it's what makes it valuable and it creates long-term opportunities for people. I actually remember there was one thing you did, Corey, that I really admire besides just keep your standards extraordinarily high in the most competitive market I've ever seen, is like you really made some of the tactics your own. And I think that that's so important. And so the thing I'm thinking of specifically was like how you had this goal of applying for a job a day. And, you know, we're kind of a low volume, high quality organization over here. Like that's what we do. And so sometimes 5 a week is actually a lot of jobs for some of our people. But you had a very good reason for doing 1 application a day. Do you remember talking about this? This stuck with me, and now I'm wondering if it stuck with you in the same way.
So I found that if I hadn't applied to a job in a couple days, it was super hard to get back into the groove of actually applying to the job. And I
Yes.
really began thinking about job hunting as a muscle. And if I used it a little bit 5 days a week, I could churn through like the application, the resume, the cover letter a little faster. And so I simply applied just to make it easier tomorrow. Uh,
Yeah.
and the other thing that I would sometimes do is, like, if I wasn't feeling it, I would just write the world's worst cover letter and the world's worst resume and let it sit overnight and look at it in the morning and hit send with a fresh cup of coffee. Inevitably, what I thought was a dumpster fire the night before wasn't so bad, and it didn't take much tweaking. And it was a real great early morning win to already hit submit.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's so important and that's something I've shared with other people because, you know, I'm always thinking one of the benefits of keeping the job search low volume and targeted is like you don't waste your time. Like you don't apply to things and get your hopes up for opportunities that you're not a good fit for. But you understood that like partly what made you efficient was doing it daily, doing it every day. And so you just took a job that you didn't care that much about or you understood that it wasn't the best fit and you used it as an opportunity to get reps in essentially. And I love that so much. And that's one of the things I learned from clients is like, oh, how do people understand that like efficiency matters? And that's really what we're emphasizing is like be efficient and make it their own and figure out like what that requires from them because right, like we can write resumes faster than a lot of our clients can. So it makes sense that like you would need to catch up. Like you would need to invest time in learning those tactics. So I thought that was like a beautiful way of just like figuring out what you need, taking the idea and making it your own. So I always loved that you did that.
I think the other piece from it is, like, we all set goals for ourselves. And I think early on, you're like, oh, I'm going to do 100 a week. And that's like, is that a reasonable goal for yourself? And that's something I found myself like asking myself so often. Like one a day. Did I do it all the time? No, I did that probably 80% of the time. But that's okay because that's still at least 3 jobs a week that I've applied to. And that's
Yes.
more than none. And I found so often that if I was like, I'm going to do 100 of something, I would burn out and then I wouldn't do it. And in the long run, that's worse because then it takes me so much longer to recover from that. So just give yourself
Yes.
grace, be reasonable.
Yeah. And sometimes I think people have a hard time in this process deciding what reasonable is, and that's why I like to set the bar real low. If you're not applying to any jobs, no point in aiming for 100 from the get-go. Let's get one out the door. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's give you a resume that you feel comfortable sending out, because often that like baby step, it sounds unsatisfactory in the moment, but it's usually the key to like going from like getting nothing done to getting something done. And something is always greater than nothing, right?
And more often than not, I found at least one job a day that I was excited about. Now, keep in mind, I was applying, like I have 10 plus years as a product manager, and I was applying to in the intersection of media and technology. So I was targeted, but even with that target in mind, I found at least one job or so a day that I was excited about enough to apply to that I was also qualified for. Because that's the other piece that I feel like is sometimes forgotten right now because people are so eager to just get a job. But I got the most traction when I was at least 80 to 90% qualified. And as a woman in tech, it pains me to say that. But I think the way the job market is right now, being super conscious of what your experience is and the overlap between your experience and the requirements of that job, having that be substantial.
Yeah. It really is more important, than people realize, I think. And when you're taking the time to, like, look at jobs and tailor your resume, you learn really quickly, I think. Am I a good fit for this job, or is this a total reach or a little bit of a reach? Like, a little bit of a reach is one thing, but a lot of a reach is another in this market. It can be really difficult to get traction making a big pivot.
And then I did find that if I reached a little bit more for a job, inevitably the interviews were so much harder and ultimately not
Yeah.
successful. And an interview ideally should be a conversation of what you bring to the role and not a whole lot of stress of, oh my God, how am I going to answer the question is what the heck does that word mean? I don't know what that acronym is. Like that shouldn't have happened during an interview.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. It is true. Sometimes our clients get so good at writing their resumes, they end up in interviews that are a real reach for them. But I think that's a real testament to your resume writing abilities for what it's worth. Maybe we'll have to bring you on board here. Can you tell us about some of the work you did as you were looking for a new job? You took on some contract work. I have often been telling people that they should consider short-term or even long-term contract project work because the job search is taking a while. And this is largely for people who are unemployed between jobs. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came up for you? I know it was fairly serendipitous. Everything's serendipitous in retrospect.
Yes. Two opportunities for contracting came to me, and they literally sort of just came to me. One at the start of my job hunt and one at the end. And at the start, now this is the start of when I had been unemployed, because when I was laid off. I was very transparent with my friend group and let them know like these are the jobs I'm looking for. This is where my headspace is right now. And I had a friend who worked with an ed tech company and was able to get me a lot of contract work there. It was not related to the types of jobs I was looking for. I have a background as an educator, but it kept the lights on literally. And it was helpful to have the money, I will say, like from a financial perspective, but it was also good just to have my skills were needed in some way, shape, or form. I had deliverables again. I had output. That is good for my mental health just to like keep me going and keep me structured.
Yeah.
And then near the end of my job hunt, which I didn't know at the time, I had applied for a full-time role at a digital media consultancy. And between when I applied for the job and had my interview scheduled, they hired someone for the full-time job because it's just like the type of company that moves so fast. But they're like, we like you. Could you come on as a contract? And that was within product management. So it was definitely like using the skills that I would use, not the types of products that I traditionally manage, but like well within my skill set. And so I took that on. And that was really like a nice moment to do what I love doing, like do the product management work that I like
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. I think there's yes, there's the financial piece, which obviously if you go from being paid to not being paid, like having income is good. And I think it allows you to move differently in the job search, like a little more calmly, perhaps. But the other things that you mentioned are so important, like having some kind of structure to your day. Otherwise, I think people's like you said, like sleep and work and being awake can all be a little bit of a mess if you don't have a job to get up and go to in the morning. You lose the connection you get from interacting with coworkers. Work is a source of validation and feeling plugged in and like you're contributing to something. And to have all of that wiped from you and taken away, I think for all those reasons, I think it's so helpful to have even a part time something
Mhm.
that you can just not think about your job search. First of all, engage with other people, do something you know you're good at and feel good about. I think it makes a big difference in how people are able to show up for themselves when they are job searching.
I think the other piece, like sometimes you like, yes, and to that is that after like a bit of rejection, you begin to question, can I even do this job
Yeah.
anymore? And if you're doing some contract work, you're showing up doing it again. And it's lovely to be like, oh, yeah, this is how you do this. And I can do it. And just gives you a little bit more oomph as you're looking, like gives you that extra boost of energy to continue looking.
Yeah. I think I think we all need a boost, It's a time when a lot of us could use a boost for sure. Is there anything you wanna share to people who maybe are looking for a job right now, thinking about looking for a job right now? What would your advice be?
It's going to take longer than you think it's going to take. Um, so I think just be prepared and be gentle and gracious with yourself. I was very fortunate to have a bit of cushion and a runway. Like I had some savings and the contract work on top of that allowed me to be committed to what I wanted and give me the runway of time to keep looking for that job. If that hadn't been the case, I probably would have made different choices earlier in the job hunt. Maybe it could still have taken just as long. Be curious. Like just sitting down and having conversations with people was super helpful and just taking the time to do that. So giving that to yourself, taking time off is also important. I definitely went for a walk a day. And yes, I had time to do that, but not being in front of my computer was really good. And be really self aware. So, like, if I was sitting down to write a resume or a cover letter and suddenly it felt really hard or I had trouble focusing, it was one of two things. One, I'm not qualified for that job, so I should back off and stop doing it. Or two, I'm not in the right headspace right now to do this successfully, so I need to step away and go do something else.
Yes, sometimes both. Sometimes stepping
Yeah,
away
sometimes
also
it's both.
helps you step away and reassess, come back with fresh eyes for sure. Corey, thank you so much for taking some time and giving us a little bit of insight in this super challenging space in the market and a super hard search. We want to check in. How's the new job going?
So far, so good. I am just starting my third month now. And I have to say, it has been wonderful to put that thinking cap back on and learn a new company's internal processes, terminology for things. To have colleagues again has really been delightful. I didn't know how I'd feel about being hybrid. I do really enjoy going back into the office from time to time. It's like a nice change of pace.
Yeah, it's good. It is good. It's funny because I've been telling people, the difference between a remote only job search and a hybrid job search is really night and day. And so you bit the bullet a little bit and said like, "Yeah, I'll go into the office," but it sounds like you still have lots of flexibility and you're happy with how that's all playing out.
It has been very good. And it's to me, like so product management is so much understanding the audience of who uses that product. And this is a new audience for me. So really digging in to understand what these problems are in this space for the user and then thinking through how we're going to solve that and aligning that with like business needs. Using my brain in different ways has been fun.
We love it. We love that your brain is back in business. We a little less Vin Diesel, a little bit more active brain, active thinking.
Never
Corey, thank
less
you.
than Diesel. Never.
Never, never. He's a mainstay now. He's part of the crew. Awesome. Thank you so much, Corey. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for all of your help and guidance throughout my job hunt. I would not have made it through. At this point, I have recommended Jenn and Work Wonders to anyone and everyone who is job hunting. And the line I always say is that I would literally fight a dragon for this woman because she helped my job hunt that much and kept me sane and talked me off those like ledges, those mental ledges that pop up and calm me down and refocus me. So thank you.
It was truly my pleasure. I think having someone out there willing to slay dragons for me is absolutely the highest form of compliment. I take that very seriously. It's funny because like that actually came in on assessment forms from the people you referred to me as like, Corey said she'd slay dragons for Jenn. So I'm kind of curious about getting on her calendar. But the thing I want to say, and I want other people to hear this too, is like part of the reason your job search felt hard to me is because you were one of those people actually doing so many correct things. Your resume actually got you interviews at some very, very competitive places. Your interviews actually got you multiple rounds of interviews at multiple places. So you were truly one of those people who just were a finalist multiple times. And I think a lot of the advice was hang in there, keep going, keep doing what you're doing, which is not really advice I tend to give a lot of because people have different bottlenecks and you were stuck at the end because you are so good and you were such a good fit and you did have so much to offer and you just had to like wait for the right role and fight your way in there, which you eventually did. I remember, Corey, actually when you got your job, I texted the team. I texted Jenn, I texted Shelby and Nicole, everyone. When someone is struggling in their job search, we all after a while start taking it personally on some level. So we were right there. We all do. It's like, hey, this should be working. She's great. And it was just like, we were all so happy and so relieved and so glad that it turned out to be such a good job for you at the end of all of this. Like, it really is like the perfect encapsulation of like all the things you've done, all the things you've wanted to do. It checked all your boxes. And so honestly, we are thrilled that we got to support you and really happy that you landed somewhere great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you took something away. I know you took something away from Corey's story. I know I did. I love the way she sort of like took what we offered, made it her own, and really hung in there. When I say I haven't seen someone with this much focus, I really mean it. Corey's LinkedIn information can be found in the show notes, and you can also find my LinkedIn in the show notes. I'm taking a bit of a break from Meta apps at the moment, and we'll be focused on LinkedIn. I will be focused also on the Substack for this podcast, which I did create. I really created that for people who don't listen to the podcast, aren't into podcasts, don't want to be listening to content in that way. So if you know someone who's not a podcast person but could benefit from the content that we share here, that Substack will be in the show notes as well. And of course, please come on over to workwonderscareers.com and hop on our email list. We also still have time for you to enroll in our winter job search cohort. So if you could use some support with your job search this winter, let's do it together. Thanks to Corey for sharing her story, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks so much.